Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. The distance Qin Mu had teleported Blind wasn't great, not even a mile away from Secret Waters Pass, with great ruins behind him. To Blind, destroying Qin Mu's teleportation wasn't hard, so the boy could only send him that far at most. Blind quietly returned to Secret Waters Pass to find Qin Mu. Without a word, he undid the seals on Ling Yuxiu and Sai Yunxiang's divine treasures. Propping himself on his cane, he walked away by himself. Qin Mu was stunned. Grandpa Blind. Grown up, all grown up. Dark tears trickled out from old Blind's eye sockets, and the faster he walked, the faster they fell. The child he'd raised had finally grown up, and his heart suddenly felt empty and sour. Qin Mu most likely wouldn't be going back to disabled elderly village again. He was no longer the little youth that carried him while training punches. The child he had picked up already had his own ideas and ability to protect himself. His heart was wild, and after seeing the outside world, he wouldn't want to remain in disabled elderly village where there was only a bunch of old men and one old woman. Blind walked so quickly that when Qin Mu rushed to the city walls of Secret Waters Pass, he could only see his grandpa's back that was leaving farther and farther away. It looked a little lonely. The youth's heart was also slightly depressed. He waved his hand, but didn't say anything. Blind had his back toward him, but he seemed to see him wave his hand, so he also waved back. He didn't turn back though. Qin Mu saw Blind lowering his hand after seeming to have wiped his eye sockets with it. He seemed to be clearing his tears. Blind quickly walked through the river, and after a while came to disabled elderly village. There was no one else there, so the place had already become the world of hen dragons. They had laid brood and moved into the houses of village chief, Blind, and the rest. When they saw Blind coming back, one young and proud hen dragon rushed to him for a fight, planning to chase the old blind man out of their territory. After a moment, the bamboo cane pierced through that creature and stripped it of its feathers. It was then roasted on a bonfire while the other hen dragons hid in a corner and shivered. Blind then went to Butcher's room and dug out a few jars of wine. After roasting the hen dragon, he drank with his meal. Once he was full, he threw the chicken bones all over the ground. When he stood up, he reached for his bamboo cane, but it had already turned into ashes by the flames. Stunned, Blind patted the ashes with his hand. He walked a surging river that was outside the village in wide strides. "How many years has it been?" he muttered to himself. "Old brother, how many years have you accompanied me? When I lost and carried you here, village chief said that my heart is defeated and I no longer deserve to have you. He made me put you away, buried in this surging river. He said I would never need to have you in disabled elderly village." Waves rose on the surface of surging river, and a soft rumbling came from the bottom of the river. Ripples spread out into the surroundings with a regular pattern. Blind walked onto the water, his tattered clothes flapping in the wind. "Back then when I abandoned you, my heart was dead. I saw nothing worth living for in this world anymore. In the past, you had followed me because of my strength, my invincibility, my arrogance." While he stood on the river's surface, an incomparably terrifying will to fight suddenly burst forth from his small body. It rushed straight into the sky, and the clouds warped, transforming into a tortoise with a snake coiling around it. The tortoise was black and had a dragon head, while the snake was a flying serpent soaring with 1,000 wings. Suddenly, whispers came from the bottom of the river. It was a strange voice that sounded like the roars of a dragon yet at the same time as the dead whispering. It was the dragon language and also voices from another world. If anyone heard it, they'd feel as if a long and soft body had gradually risen from the river and coiled around Blind's small and thin one. "Satur, mo ba sa, 11 chu mi tur, you've lost, eyes are blind, don't deserve to have me. I've lost." Blind straightened. His stature was short, and other than village chief and butcher in the past, he was much shorter than everyone in the village. Even though he was small, he gave others a feeling that he was abnormally tall, imposing, and straight. Sorrow was on Blind's face as he said in a low voice, "My divine eyes were dug out and my Tao heart was defeated. I don't deserve to have you, But instead of saying that I had abandoned you, it's you who has abandoned me. At that time, I had lost completely, and I didn't deserve to have you. The waves on the river surface grew larger, and ripples started swirling. A huge whirlpool formed in the middle of the river, and the strange voice came out from within, bringing along with it a terrifying air of awe. Shichu emaito, yihi supo suo? Don't deserve to have me, so why have you come? I've found my Tao heart. Blind's eyebrows and hair fluttered in the wind, and his clothes flew outwards. His voice like the rumbling thunder resonated through the clouds. His will to fight became incomparably sharp and powerful, as though a god had once again returned to the mortal world. The me in the past only chased after the extremes of the divine eyes. I could see through everything, yet I couldn't see through the human heart. Whereas the me now has someone I need to protect. For this child, I found my fighting spirit once again, and picked my confidence and Tao heart. He stretched out a hand toward the river's surface, and his voice rumbled. My Longtor, I had abandoned you in the past, but will you still be willing to follow me? Do you still reminiscence about the times in the past, the days we bathed in blood? If you want, if you are willing, I shall do as you wish. I shall let you experience fights and the bitterness that you had never experienced. One man, one spear, we shall kill all gods and devils that stand in our way. Boom! The river's surface exploded, and the roars of a dragon rang in all directions. From the bottom of the river, a huge pitch-black dragon rose, formed by black bones. It slowly swam out from the water, and its numerous joints cracked continuously as it coiled around Blind's small and thin frame. The pitch-black bones trembled and rattled non-stop. The sound became louder and louder while rays of bloodlight shone through. An incomparably terrifying aura spread out along with an unrivaled fierceness. Blind gripped tightly one of the bones, and the black dragon suddenly retracted itself. The bones collided with each one as sparks shot out in all directions, and changed shape into a black dragon spear. Longtor, you are finally awake. I'm also finally awake. With the black dragon spear in his hand, Blind was full of delight. He didn't even turn his head back when he left disabled elderly village. I will never return to this village again. Follow me to relive the days we bathed in blood. In Secret Waters Pass, Qin Mu sensed a terrifying aura bursting forth in great ruins, and he raised his head to look in that direction for a moment before looking away. There were all kinds of strange things in great ruins that would erupt from time to time, so it was actually something very normal. I plan to make a trip to Sunwell. Are you girls really coming along as well? Qin Mu surveyed his surroundings, and his gaze landed on Ling Yuxiu, Cai Yunxiang, and Hu Linga. I'm going over there to fulfill my promise, but I don't know if Sunwell will welcome you girls or not. He revealed an apologetic look as he added, you girls are different from us, outsiders, while we are the abandoned people of great ruins. Hu Linga transformed into a little fox and jumped onto Qin Mu's shoulder. She chased the dark green flood dragon off him and wrapped herself around his neck like a scarf. I'm also an abandoned person of great ruins, so I shall go with young master. If you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. Since I'm already the cult mistress, I definitely have to follow cult master wherever you go, Cai Yunxiang said shyly. Ling Yuxiu sneered and said, even the cult mistresses should have a first and second, right? Cai Yunxiang chuckled and said, what does the previous cult mistress want to say? Ling Yuxiu was furious, but then burst out laughing. I won't fight with you over this, I will just not go then. Grandpa Blind kidnapped me, so my father must be worried sick. I shall return to inform him that I'm safe and sound. The marriage was merely Grandpa Blind's game, so it's not counted. If Saintess Xiong really treats it as a real marriage, then she can be the cult mistress. That's right, cowherd boy, what promise are you going to fulfill? I made a promise to the Sun Guardian that I will help reignite the sun on Sun ship. Qin Mu caressed the head of the little fox on his neck. After finding Sun Jade Eyes, I've been busy and couldn't leave for a visit. The longer I drag this out, the shorter the Sun Guardian's life will be. Since I've already come to Secret Waters Pass, I might as well make a trip to Sunwell and hopefully manage to help. Secret Waters Pass was very close to Constellation C, and he could head to Sunwell from there. Qin Mu really wanted to meet the Sun Guardian again, afraid that her legs might have already been swallowed by the ship. Ling Yuxiu and Cai Yunxiang had never heard of Constellation C or Sunwell, but Ling Yuxiu had seen Sun ship before. She acted nonchalantly and asked, "When Sun ship came to Border Dragon City, I missed it and didn't meet this Sun Guardian." "That's right, I still don't know if that person is a man or a woman." "A girl. Her name is Yang Jingjing," Qin Mu said honestly. "Her age is similar to yours." Ling Yuxiu gave a warm smile and said, "Since our ages are similar, we can surely get along well. Let me go to broaden my horizons and meet this sister Yang." Cai Yunxiang rolled her eyes and smiled. "I got caught by Grandpa blind carelessly and was forced to marry, yet Cult Master doesn't have tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex. Since I'm already here, it's also good to go and meet the Sun Guardian to broaden my horizons." Qin Mu nodded and said, "The position of Sun Guardian is extremely high. She is of the god race and her status is slightly higher than of me, an abandoned person of great ruins." God race? The two girls were speechless. Qin Mu summoned a flood dragon and it immediately changed into its true body. Everyone went onto its back, but when the dragon Qilin wanted to jump on as well, he was kicked down by Qin Mu. With a pleasant face, he said warmly, "Fatty dragon, you should train your body more. Linger, supervise him." Hu Linger gave a sound of acknowledgement. The dragon Qilin blinked and couldn't help shuddering when he saw Qin Mu's vibrant smile. He cried out, "Cult Master, I won't dare to be picky anymore." "Not picky anymore?" Qin Mu said with a pleasant face. "So why are there still fire element divine vitality pills hidden in your cheeks, not eaten?" The dragon Qilin jumped in shock and cried out, "How did you know I hid my fire element divine vitality pills in the cheeks?" Qin Mu took out a mirror and said with a pained heart, "Look at yourself. Of all the places to hide, you chose your cheeks and you hid such a large amount as well." The dragon Qilin immediately looked at the mirror and saw his two cheeks bulging out as though there were two huge balls in his mouth. The dragon Qilin wanted to spit out the fire element divine vitality pills, but when he saw the pleasant smile on Qin Mu's face, he got so frightened that he gulped down all of the pills. "What a pity, he should be able to go on the table for New Year," muttered Qin Mu. The dragon Qilin shuddered and ran behind them obediently. Hu Linger in the meantime stood on his head and encouraged him continuously, "Fatty dragon, if you run slow, you will be slaughtered." Qin Mu relaxed. Secret Waters Pass wasn't far from Border Dragon City, and according to the geographical map of Great Ruins, Constellation C was located at Heavenly Dragon Star Palace that was north of Border Dragon City. It was 200 miles away, and it was called Star C on the map. However, the people around Border Dragon City called it Constellation C. There were numerous locations in Great Ruins that had a different name from the past, which had to have been a result from the fall of Founding Emperor era. According to the information Qin Mu knew, after Founding Emperor era ended, there was a huge break in the recorded history. There were about 1,000 or more years during which few things were put to writing. Other than some of the scattered records lying in 3 big sacred grounds and Little Jade Capital, other sects and countries didn't have any memory of that period of time. Qin Mu summoned the dark green flood dragon, and it opened its mouth to reveal the true dragon's nest that had been refined by dragon-rearing sovereign. The 5 feet true dragon's nest was still quite big, but even a godlike dragon-rearing sovereign could only refine it to the size of a table. If he wanted to make it smaller, he would require even more strength. With dragon-rearing sovereign's current cultivation, it was impossible for him. Yet the true dragon lord was refined into a jade pendant, so doesn't this mean that the cultivation of the person who refined the emperor's disc is even higher than that of dragon-rearing sovereign? Qin Mu was stunned. Who was the one who had taken away the true dragon lord and refined it into a jade pendant? Why did that god hand it to Ling family? What was their aim? The dark green flood dragon spat out the true dragon's nest, but just as Qin Mu planned to catch it, he immediately felt an incomparably heavy pressure. "Take it back quickly." Boom! The two girls were alarmed when they saw Cult Master Qin being squashed by the dragon's nest, both his shoulders dislocated. This fake mountain basin seems to be much heavier than Great Cult Master's sword pellet, Cai Yunxiang whispered and stuck her tongue out when she recalled how she had sent black gold essence for Qin Mu's sword, causing him to sink into the ground. Qin Mu grunted. He exerted all his strength to pull out his 10 fingers. The dragon Qilin immediately ran over and tried to curry favor by saying, "Cult Master, I can help you lick your hands." "No need." Qin Mu's arms swayed helplessly, and he circulated his vital qi. He endured the pain as he set his arms back into place and took out a bottle of dragon saliva to spread it on his fingers. He then let out a sigh of relief. With the appearance of the true dragon's nest, the Emperor's disc on his neck had begun to stir once more. It became hot and scorching, and stretched its body like a small dragon, squirming once more, trying to fly back into the dragon's nest. Such a situation had happened once before, when Qin Mu was nearly killed by the flood dragons. At that time, the Emperor's disc had popped out its small head to make the bunch of flood dragons submit. However, the true Dragon Lord had already been refined into the Emperor's disc. Dragon-rearing sovereign had said that it was impossible for it to become a true dragon. True dragons were born from Qi and fate, which gave rise to their corporeal bodies. True Dragon Lord had been a main dragon vein, but it was refined into treasure, so there was no more possibility for it to become a true dragon. Qin Mu took the Emperor's disc from his neck. The moment he loosened his grip, it flew up and stretched out in the air. It gradually grew larger, but its length was still about a foot or so. It then vanished into the true dragon's nest. Qin Mu looked at the dragon's nest and saw that the Emperor's disc coiled around the center of the 9th layer, precisely in the gap there. When the true Dragon Lord entered the nest, a world-shaking aura burst forth. The flood dragons beside Qin Mu turned limp as they fell prone on the ground. Even the flood dragon that was carrying everyone hurriedly went down to lie prone on the ground, unmoving. The dragon Qilin also immediately stopped. The fur and scales on his body stood up on end, but he couldn't fight against the terrifying aura from the dragon's nest. He was pressured down on the ground, not daring to even lift his head. Qin Mu didn't care much about it, for he saw numerous runes flickering on the dragon's nest. They were the writings of the dragon race. There were thousands of them that continuously changed, without a single one repeating. Different words contained different meaning, and the writings on the true dragon's nest contained an incomparably complicated technique. True dragons were born from fate, and it was born from the Tao of heaven and earth. Thus true dragons were close to Tao, and every dragon would naturally master the language of the dragon race. There was no need for them to learn it. In that case, there was no need to repeat any word, since the dragons could use a word to represent a phrase, a sentence, and even an essay of thousands of words. It was because of this that there was an unimaginably high wall blocking them when other races tried to learn the dragon language. Dragon-rearing sovereign's bloodline was extremely pure, but he was a flood dragon and not a true dragon. Because of that, even if he had taught Qin Mu quite a lot of the dragon language, there were still numerous words on the dragon's nest that he didn't recognize. Among the words dragon-rearing sovereign had taught him, the meaning of some of them was extremely complicated. If someone wanted to express them in human words, tens of thousands of them would be needed. What was even worse was that some couldn't even be expressed in human language. Qin Mu memorized diligently, putting to memory all of the dragon language on the true dragon's nest. The two girls came over, and Cai Yunxiang asked in bewilderment, "What are these writings?" "Writings of the dragon race." Ling Yuxia was astonished. "These are all writings of the dragon race. I had learned some before. My father had taught me, but I only recognize a few of them, a couple of them here and there." Qin Mu gave it some thought and suddenly asked, "Sister Yuxia, do you have the original 9 Dragons monarch technique of your Ling family?" At first, it hadn't been outstanding, but after the improvements of the experts of the many generations, it had slowly become a top-notch technique. However, Qin Mu reckoned the first copy would have still been preserved, otherwise, Emperor Yangfeng wouldn't have taught Ling Yuxia the dragon language. Qin Mu suspected that the original 9 Dragons monarch technique was written in the dragon language, and Emperor Yangfeng had taught his daughter to let her read the most primitive version of 9 Dragons monarch technique. "How did you know I've seen it?" Ling Yuxia was truly astonished. "The most ancient 9 Dragons monarch technique of my Ling family is written in the dragon language, and I've indeed seen it before. Father had made me memorize it before teaching me his version." Qin Mu smiled and said, if you'll recite the most ancient version of Nine Dragons Monarch technique in the dragon language once, I will give you a huge benefit later. Ling Yuxiu shook her head. I can't recite it, but I can write it down. Qin Mu fetched some paper and brush, and Ling Yuxiu wrote down a few strangely shaped characters. This is it. Nine Dragons Monarch technique of my Ling family was recorded on the Emperor's disc, but it's a pity it has gone missing. I wonder which vile thief stole it. Qin Mu's face grew slightly red, but he didn't reply to her. Instead, he continued to look at what she had written. I see, Nine Dragons Monarch technique is actually the introductory chapter of the technique that appeared on the True Dragon Lord and the True Dragon's Nest. He looked through the paper before looking at runes that were flashing continuously on the dragon's nest and finally found the overall basis for the True Dragon Lord's technique. After that, Qin Mu continued to study it, and a broad and exquisite technique slowly formed in his mind, becoming rich and perfect. Ling family's Nine Dragon Monarch technique was only the introduction and not any divine or miraculous technique. However, since the Ling family could perfect it into a top-notch technique that could compete with the techniques of the three big scared grounds, it was enough to see how astounding it truly was. He cracked the riddle bit by bit, and he became more and more astonished. It was the technique to seize fate that dragon-rearing sovereign had mentioned, but it wasn't completely about it. By cultivating the technique to absorb the dragon chi of the True Dragon Lord, he would become the True Dragon Lord himself. The strong points of that technique lay in making the magic power of the cultivator incomparably dense, and his strength like that of a true dragon. Even among all the techniques that Qin Mu had seen in the past, it was probably only Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique that could reach a cultivation on the same level. However, the attainments of that technique in strength and the corporeal body was not something Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique could compare. Even though Qin Mu had more than small attainments in his corporeal body, Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique required a powerful body refinement technique to complement it, but he didn't have that kind of skill. The body refinement technique in great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures wasn't considered to be top-notch. However, the technique on the True Dragon's Nest could refine the corporeal body into that of a Dragon King. Superb technique, truly a superb technique. Emperor Yangfeng is remarkable as well. Qin Mu was full of praises after he had cracked more than half of the technique. He only raised his head after meeting numerous writings that he didn't recognize. He let out a shaky breath and praised, His Majesty is truly remarkable. Cultivating an introduction into an exceptional martial art, such a talent isn't much inferior to that of Imperial Preceptor. Sister Yuxiu, when had your Ling family received this technique? I guess about 700 or more years ago. Ling Yuxiu recalled what Emperor Yangfeng had told her. Father once mentioned that the ancestor of Ling family had met a god who passed him the Emperor's disc and even taught him the dragon language. However, the character of our ancestor was lax, and he didn't put learning the dragon language to heart. At that time, he liked a woman and placed all his mind on her, who was none other than our first grandmother. Yet when our ancestor wanted to learn, he realized that the god had already left and that he'd already forgotten 80 to 90% of the dragon language that God had taught him. In the end, he could only comprehend the initial 9 Dragons Monarch technique from the Emperor's disc. Grandpa Def's words were true. Qin Mu thought to himself. No wonder that Grandpa Blind also said that women are trouble, it's really the case. Grandpa Butcher also said that women are too troublesome. Old Ma doesn't like to be close to women either, and now I see that there are actually reasons for that. I can't be like the ancestor of Ling family and delay my cultivation. However, Sister Yuxiu is really quite pretty, and even though Sister Xiong is skinnier, she's also quite good-looking. His heart was alarmed, and he immediately wiped out the impure thoughts in his mind. He pulled the True Dragon Lord out from the True Dragon's Nest, and the dragon-shaped dragon vein turned back into a jade pendant with its head connected to the tail. Ling Yuxiu saw this and was slightly suspicious. This piece of jade is slightly similar to the Emperor's disc of our Ling family, but there's also some difference. I've heard the Emperor's disc was a jade pendant while this piece consists of parts put together. There's a gap between them. Qin Mu smiled and said, I said I will give you a huge benefit earlier, so now I shall teach you the 9 Dragons Monarch technique I comprehended. Ling Yuxiu burst out laughing. My father taught me 9 dragons monarch technique, so could you have comprehended more than him? Qin Mu slowly explained the 9 dragons monarch technique that he had comprehended, and gradually, Ling Yuxia's face became more and more solemn. She realized that at the start, it was still the initial technique of the Ling family, but as it went further, it became more and more profound. It was even more profound and powerful than the 9 dragons monarch technique that Emperor Yangfeng had perfected. Could it be that I learned the fake 9 dragons monarch technique and the cowherd boy learned the true one? Ling Yuxia was in a slight daze. Only the introductory chapter of the 9 dragons monarch technique that Qin Mu had taught her belonged to the Ling family. The content afterward had surpassed what she had ever known. Not only did it surpass, it even transcended it. What was most terrifying was that 9 dragons monarch technique of Ling family seemed like a branch developed from the introductory form, while the 9 dragons monarch technique that Qin Mu taught her was the trunk. Her branch was only one possibility from it. The most primitive 9 dragons monarch technique was like a small sapling that had just broken out from the dirt. Ling family's perfected 9 dragons monarch technique was like the trunk breaking off and growing a branch, while Qin Mu's 9 dragons monarch technique grew upward like a tree. 9 dragons monarch technique was perfected by generations and generations of people until it was finally finished at Emperor Yanfeng's generation. By then, the technique had already grown to its extreme and there was no more possibility of digging out more potential. However, Qin Mu's 9 dragons monarch technique possessed boundless potential. Yet why did the continuous hard work of the many generations of Ling family unable to compare to Qin Mu's comprehension of a short while? Could he be a saint that appears once every 500 years as well? Qin Mu didn't think much about it. The 9 dragons monarch technique he had learned from the true dragon's nest wasn't complete either. He just taught Ling Yuxia what he had comprehended, which was sort of a compensation for the Ling family. It was impossible for him to return the Emperor's disc. It was a treasure that Cripple had given him, and the rules of great ruins were that the things given to one could never be returned. Besides, the true dragon's nest and Emperor's disc were a pair, so one couldn't be without the other. With the nest, Ling family had no use for the Emperor's disc. The complete 9 dragons monarch technique could only be seen when the two were combined. Qin Mu took the Emperor's disc away from the dragon's nest, and the pressure on the flood dragons and the dragon Qilin instantly vanished. They all rose with eyes full of respect as they looked at Qin Mu. He ordered them to continue on their way to Heavenly Dragon Star Palace. When he looked at the dragon's nest, his heart stirred slightly. He smiled and said, "I have an extremely fine place to cultivate 9 dragons monarch technique. Sister Yuxia, come with me, let us jump into this dragon's nest." After he finished saying that, he grabbed Ling Yuxia's hand and jumped into the dragon's nest. Ling Yuxia was astonished, thinking about how they were supposed to jump in when the fake mountain basin was so small. Yet when they came close to it, it grew larger and larger. Their figures descended at a quick speed, as though they were dropping several thousand yards from the sky. Meanwhile, the landscape in the basin seemed to have become a huge space that was over 20 miles in length and width. Just the perimeter of the 9th level of the dragon's nest was already over 10 miles. Just as the two landed, cries of astonishment came from the sky. Cai Yinxiang had actually jumped with them as well, and when she landed in the space of the true dragon's nest, she realized that there was a completely different world there. It astonished her. Hu Linga saw the 3 of them disappear from the dragon's back, she immediately jumped over. When she looked into the landscape of the basin, she saw Qin Mu and the other 2 like ants. They seemed to have become part of the landscape in the basin. However, they were still moving and talking, though their voices seemed to be coming from dozens of miles away. They sounded unclear. The 3 of them looked curiously around the place. Even though Qin Mu had followed Dragon Rearing Sovereign into the dragon's nest before, most of it had been submerged in magma, so he couldn't see it back then. Only now could he take a look at the whole nest. The inside was split into 9 levels, and each one had numerous glowing pillars. Some were stalactites, some were dragon teeth, and some were pillars. The writings and pictures flashing on the ground and the structures transformed continuously, containing indescribable mysterious principles. Ling Yuxia took in a breath and instantly felt the incomparably dense dragon qi flooding toward her. She couldn't help giving out a cry of astonishment at that. The dragon Qi in the true dragon's nest was even denser than in the capital. On top of that, comparing the dragon Qi here to the Qi of the 9 dragons was like comparing heaven to earth. Their quality was completely different. The dragon Qi in the nest seemed to be of much higher quality, far surpassing that of the 9 dragons. After all, their Qi had formed when the 9 dragons' veins converged, while the dragon Qi in the nest had gathered all the dragon Qi of the veins in all of Eternal Peace Empire and Great Ruins. Cultivating here is much faster than cultivating in the capital. Ling Yuxiu executed the 9-dragon monarch technique that Qin Mu had imparted to her and instantly felt her cultivation increasing by leaps and bounds. Her vital Qi also became much purer. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures had techniques that observed the divine dragons, so Cai Yunxiang gave it a try as well. She felt the dragon Qi flooding toward her endlessly, and after a short moment, it was as if she had cultivated the technique for dozens of days. It shocked her to no end. If she could cultivate here for over a dozen days, it would be equivalent to cultivating diligently in the outside world for dozens of years. If there wasn't any restriction in cultivation realms, her attainments in techniques and divine arts would be unimaginable. Of course, even if there was a restriction due to cultivation realm, it was still extraordinary. The nest was definitely a sacred ground to cultivate dragon attribute techniques and divine arts. It's a pity it doesn't benefit me much. Cai Yunxiang shook her head. She mainly cultivated the creation writings from great educational heavenly devil scriptures, having been taught by the young patriarch. He had studied the 7 writings of creation to their extreme and imparted all of his comprehensions to her. However, even if she didn't receive the teachings of unity technique which Qin Mu got, she was still considered one of the rare experts in the younger generation. Qin Mu was also absorbing the Qi of the true dragon, but it was different for him. Ling Yuxiu cultivated 9 Dragons Monarch technique while he was trying to incorporate the body refinement part of 9 Dragons Monarch technique into his Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. The powerful point of 9 Dragons Monarch technique lay in the vigorous magic power that was no inferior to that of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. He incorporated the 9 Dragons Monarch technique that Emperor Yangfeng had taught him into Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique before, but new one he had comprehended was much more complicated. The language of the dragon race was also different from the human language, so it was much harder to fuse the 2 techniques. Even trying to absorb only the body refinement technique was very difficult, not something that could be done in a short while. Not long later, Hu Linger's voice came from the outside. "Young master, we are at Heavenly Dragon Star Palace." Qin Mu left Ling Yuxiu, who was in deep cultivation, inside the dragon's nest while bringing Cai Yunxiang out. When the 2 of them flew out, their bodies gradually became bigger. By the time they landed on the ground, their bodies had returned to normal. There was no discomfort in the whole process. Dragon-rearing sovereign is remarkable. He didn't shrink the dragon's nest, but instead shrunk the space in which it exists. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. That kind of ability was equivalent to a Dao Tai sac, but a Dao Tai sac contained space inside, while dragon-rearing sovereign used great magic power to shrink the space of dozens of miles into just 7-8 feet. Heavenly Dragon Star Palace is right in front, Hu Linger said. Qin Mu looked forward and saw dilapidated palaces before his eyes. Heavenly Dragon Star Palace was a cluster of old constructions. Numerous villages were clustered within them while above were huge mountain-like rocks floating in the sky. They were black, red, blue, and all the other colors. Those rocks were filled with thousands of holes, and they collided time and again, showering stone fragments. Many larger pieces also fell down, but they never landed on the villages. Instead, they'd fall somewhere outside. The once tall and majestic divine palaces and shrines had become ruins, yet they could still protect the people living within them. Qin Mu looked at the earthy-looking villagers wearing beast-skin clothes and couldn't help feeling a sense of familiarity. Cai Yunxiang's face was slightly reddish. Even during winter, the villagers wore short pants and close-fitting shirts made of beast skins. There were also some kids that were over 10 years old still squatting down with half of their buttocks showing shamefully. I was also like this back then? Great Cult Master Qin said excitedly. Cai Yunxiang tried to imagine Great Cult Master Qin also showing half of his buttocks back then and couldn't help spitting at the image. Qin Mu walked forward and greeted the elders in the village. He asked them about the direction to Constellation C, and after a moment, Qin Mu returned back, saying excitedly, "The elder said that Constellation C is very dangerous and it's always shooting stars. It's a resplendent sight at night. Let's go over there quickly." Sai Yunxiang cursed him endlessly in her heart. They brought the bunch of dragons to a huge valley below which was a deep abyss. However, there were countless spots of white light shining in the darkness. Looking down from above, it indeed looked like they were looking at a starry sky. "How pretty!" Hu Linga said excitedly. "They are truly like the night sky. Even the Milky Way is there." Sai Yunxiang's scalp started to crawl. The Milky Way in the abyss of Star Sea was indeed similar to the Milky Way in the sky, but the stars were colliding continuously as though they were within a bowl of boiling porridge that seemed incomparably dangerous. Whoosh! A weird pitch-black wind came blowing over from the abyss, and a star was blown out. It was as huge as a mountain, but it didn't land on the ground. Instead, it came to float in the sky. Suddenly, another star flew out of the abyss and the two huge rocks collided, exploding with a dull blast. Power burst forth, making Sai Yunxiang's heart palpitate. "Cult Master! This Star Sea is not a place where people of our cultivation can step into. Even existences of the Cult Master level might not come back. Don't worry, we have the Flood Dragons to assist us," but even though he said that, he still felt some reservations against entering. Sunwell is quite a distance away from here and it's located at the center of great ruins. However, Yang Jingjing said they had come from Star Sea and returned to Sunwell through it. Could Star Sea have some passage to reach Sunwell quickly? He pondered it for a moment, then blew his golden flute to have the Flood Dragons fly toward the Star Sea. Sai Yunxiang was on guard as though she was facing a dangerous enemy, but then she suddenly relaxed. She shook her head. "If the stars come, there's no use even if we try to defend. Why don't I see if Cult Master has any thoughts about this?" Qin Mu carefully executed secrets of dragon control to avoid the stars as he closed in on the galaxy in Star Sea. They were clearly going underground, but it didn't look like that. The place seemed like another world. They seemed to have entered a vast and deep space. Around them were stars that were the size of mountains. Qin Mu looked back and could only see a huge crack from where they had come. He couldn't see the surface anymore. The bright stars gave off rays of all colors while the galaxy swirled. Millions and millions of so-called stars were moving along and colliding continuously, causing waves and waves of force to bombard the group like knives. "Divine Dragon Cover!" Qin Mu shouted, and the Flood Dragons changed their formation, their tails connecting together. Their hind claws interlocked and with heads downwards, they created a ball to protect them, keeping them away from any danger. Qin Mu looked toward the center of the Milky Way and saw that there were yin-yang fish that looked like the Taiji diagram. They were like two incomparably huge and deep wells, while the countless stars swirled continuously around them. Above the deep wells, there seemed to be two tiers. It had to be great ruins where Sunwell and Moonwell were located. Qin Mu's heart trembled violently. The Star Sea didn't look like it was made. Instead, it seemed like another world, a world that was countless times smaller. This video will end here.